when I got into college at FIU, something changed. I don't know if it was an ego thing or if it was the perceived prestige, but I wanted to be a big shot at a corporation. And I got accepted into GE's financial management program. And it was a defining moment for me 3 months into that job where I've always been very introspective. And I ask myself kind of thought-provoking questions. And I'm a thinker. And I looked at the job wasn't what I thought it was going to be, right? And I quickly knew, hey, I can't provide for my family going up working 70, 80 hours a week. It didn't make sense to me. And I looked at my boss and all the way up the ladder, and I asked myself, do I want that job at any point in the future? And the definitive answer was no. Yep. Finished that 2-year program, left the job, went backpacking around Europe. A friend of mine invited me to a boot camp on real estate and how to do deals. A guy by the name of Dave Lindahl, ended up going to that. I plucked out a letter from that manual and I started mailing pre-foreclosures. About 60 to 75 days later, I closed my first deal, almost replaced my salary at GE.
Helping hardworking real estate investors, agents, and entrepreneurs grow a better business, mindset, and future. This is the Carrot Cast podcast. Now here's your host, Trevor Mock.
What's up, y'all? Carrot Cast coming at you. And I've got one of my probably longest time friends in the entire real estate industry, at least one of the top 5 for sure. And that's one of the guys that is one of my favorite people in the world. And a lot of you guys and gals know who this is, Mr. Alex Pardo. I'm going to do a little intro, then I'll kick it over to you to kind of give some context on who you are. But y'all, with my journey, you guys have probably heard, if you've been listening to the Carrot Cast for any length of time, you've heard my journey over the past 5 to 10 years. And with my journey, I haven't run Carrot for the whole time, right? It's like I've had 3, 4, 5, 6 businesses along the way. Some have worked, some haven't. Some I exited because I wanted to change. Some they exited for me because they went out of business. And along the way, one of the businesses that I had was something that connected parts of the real estate industry together. And that for me was a really, really magical thing that I've done many times as an entrepreneur is how do I connect people together? How do I connect the local Roseburg entrepreneur scene together so they can share ideas and they can work together better? It was an amazing thing for me locally, and I did the same thing in the real estate space. And that's when I met Alex. The first time I think we met was in Vegas, sharing a room together at a real estate event. And it's been so cool seeing what he's been doing over the last decade now as a real estate investor, as an educator, as a person who's really shepherding other investors and entrepreneurs to help them build businesses that they love. And so proud to have you on the Carrot Cast, man. Welcome to the cast.
Thank you, my friend. I truly mean this when I say it's an honor. You know how I feel about you, and you're a close friend and someone who I believe will be a lifelong friend. So you inspire me in many ways, and it's an honor to be on the Carrot Cast. So you probably don't even remember this, or you might. I think I was episode 5 or 6 on the Carrot Cast. So
you were early, man.
I was one of the early ones, so it's fantastic to be back on, and your show has grown so much, man, so it's incredible.
I don't know what episode we're on now, but I know we're somewhere between 200 and 300. And dude, it's so cool because we started the podcast in 2016, so you probably came on in 2016 or early 2017. I'll have to go look at the archives. But dude, a lot's changed since then. So what we're going to do in this episode, y'all, is we're going to catch up with Alex. We're going to see what he's doing, but also he runs a mastermind where he gets to tap into some of the smartest minds in the real estate business. And same thing as we're going through the Carrot Cast over this fall and leading into the next year, we're going to be talking with some of the smartest minds in the industry where real estate agents and real estate investors can tap into those brain trusts and go, hey, what do I need to do to prepare myself for whatever is ahead in the next year, 2, 3 years as a real estate investor or agent? And so that's part of what we're going to be doing here. But Alex, before we dive in, why don't you catch people up who didn't have a chance? We'll link up your first episode in the show notes, but catch up people with a Cliff Notes version of who are you, kind of what has your journey been like as an entrepreneur, and what are you doing now?
Yeah, brother. Thank you once again. So, born and raised in Miami, come from a Cuban household. I don't have a rags to riches story or anything like that. But I also wasn't born with a silver spoon in my mouth. My parents working class and did everything they can to provide for my sister and I. And I remember, Trevor, going back to like 10, 11 years old and being so grateful for my parents, but also knowing that I didn't want to struggle the way that I saw them struggling. And again, not like they struggled like we couldn't pay the bills, but it was just enough money at the end of the month for us to live, a very middle class lifestyle, right? And I was extremely grateful for them. And I remember thinking to myself, I want to take care of my parents one day. And I want to be able to provide for them like they provided for me. And dude, 12 years old, I'd buy baseball cards in boxes and I'd flip them for a couple bucks. And I think that was when kind of the entrepreneurial bug was planted in me. And then fast forward about 6-7 years, when I got into college at FIU, something changed. I don't know if it was an ego thing or if it was the perceived prestige, but I wanted to be a big shot at a corporation.
Yep.
I wanted to be the future CFO, CEO of like a company like GE. So I started interviewing with these big companies when I graduated, and I got accepted into GE's financial management program. And it was a defining moment for me 3 months into that job, where I've always been very introspective, and I ask myself kind of thought-provoking questions, and I'm a thinker. And I looked at the job wasn't what I thought it was going to be, right? And I quickly knew, hey, I can't provide for my family going up working 70, 80 hours a week. It didn't make sense to me. And I looked at my boss and all the way up the ladder, and I asked myself, do I want that job at any point in the future? And the definitive answer was no.
Yep.
Finished that 2-year program, left the job, went backpacking around Europe. A friend of mine invited me to a boot camp on real estate and how to do deals. A guy by the name of Dave Lindahl, ended up going to that. I plucked out a letter from that manual and I started mailing pre-foreclosures. About 60 to 75 days later, I closed my first deal, almost replaced my salary at GE.
Dude, so what year would that have been?
This was 2005, October 2005 that I went to the event, January 2016 that I closed my first deal.
Cool. So this is important here, y'all, because
January 2006. I'm sorry, 2006.
I love it. This is really important, y'all, because one thing that is happening a lot right now, and it's great. Like Alex and I lived through this a decade ago too. One thing that's happening a lot is you have a lot of real estate educators coming out of the woodworks who've only known an up market. They've been in the market the last 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like they did an amazing job putting together some sort of a business that's been successful in this last several years. But when you look at the market, it's way easier to grow a business when the market's going with you. And so one of the reasons we want to have Alex on here is because he's been through a full cycle before. Starting in 2006, he saw the crash. We'll probably hear a little bit about what he experienced during that. And then he also experienced coming out of that, leading back up to where we are today, where we're probably near some sort of another change. I don't think people predict it's going to be a crash, but there's going to be a change happening sometime soon. So back into the story, man, didn't want to take you off too far, but I want to give people context.
Yeah. So, Trevor, I've always been someone, and you've gotten to know me, I've always been a ready, fire, aim type of guy. And I think by and large, that served me really well. And there's a couple of times where it's kind of bitten me, but taking action when I kind of burn the ships mentally and I go after something, taking action has never been a challenge for me. I'm not much of a procrastinator. You talk about the market crash. I made so many mistakes early on in my entrepreneurial journey. One of the biggest mistakes is seeing mentorship and coaches and people who had walked the path that I wanted to go down. I saw that as an expense. I remember thinking to myself, I would never pay someone $5,000 to I'll just kind of figure it out. That was my mentality back then. Yep. And 2007, dude, I had wholesaled, I don't know, an average of 15, 20 properties a year the first couple of years. And I decided to get into my first rehab on a $500,000 property. And I'll spare you the gory details, but long story short, I lost 51 grand of my own capital.
Jeez.
And having said that, that was such a blessing in my life because I immediately found a coach right after that. And I never made that mistake again. And so I got caught, and when the market was shifting on a luxury property that I had no business getting involved in. And so many lessons and takeaways from that. But yeah, man, had I had somebody in my corner I would have never gotten involved in something like that. So I share that with you because I know I'm not breaking ground, but the best investment you can make is in yourself, whether it's a coach or a book or anything in between.
Dude, I want to double down on that there because you and I are very similar where I don't know what it is, kind of like that rugged individualism, where it's like, I can figure it out. I'm going to save the money and I'm just going to outsmart the system, right? And I was going to do a bunch of Google searches and hunt bigger pockets or whatever it is and learn how to do all this stuff. And I was able to figure out how to get started with all that. I was able to figure out how to build something up. But for me, I never really became really successful until the same thing. I got in masterminds and I got coaches.
Yeah.
It was 2016 when I got my first paid coach. And to give people context, I've talked about this before. I have a whole episode on coaches and coaching in the Carrot Cast. Go back and look at the archives. We'll link it up in here. But the first coach was $1,500 a month. He came into my office 2 times a week. We just chatted. He would give me frameworks. He'd give me ways to address this leadership situation. And he was a leadership coach. That's what I wanted to really focus in on. I was hyper focused in on a topic that I needed to learn how to do in Carrot. Once I learned what I needed to during that phase, growing from 8 to about 25 people at Carrot, then I needed a topic specific coach. Mm-hmm. And I was with that coach for about 18 months. And now this coach that I have, I pay $5,000 a month. And so if you guys start to look at that investment there, it might sound crazy, but one little tweak in our business, we're going to get that $60,000 back in spades, a ton. And he actually guided me away from acquiring a company. And I'm so glad that I didn't, because it would have cost me hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Wow. Look at that.
In that. So guys, get a coach, like Alex said, get a coach.
Yeah. And Trevor, to your, and I want to kind of gloss over it, but you just said you're going to in spades, but sometimes it's not the money that you make that you actually realize to the bottom line, but it's the money you're able to save and the time, stress, and headaches that you're able to avoid by having someone that can kind of guide you. And a coach a good coach doesn't tell you what to do, right? A good coach gets you progressing, moving forward, versus like something like therapy gets you looking backwards. So yeah, 100%, man. Cool.
So dude, so you lost some money in that deal. The market started to turn, and I guess give people context here because we're at a spot right now where, as of the time we're recording this, the market is like insanely hot in a lot of parts around the country. We're still in the whole COVID stuff. Interest rates are crazy low. Inventories in a lot of places in the country are way lower than normal. Yeah. People are coming out of the woodworks to buy. Even in Roseburg here, man, it's like places are flying off the shelves. What would you do differently going back to 2006, and maybe even what are you doing now, or what are you guiding people on now? What would you have done differently to avoid that mistake, other than getting a coach earlier? What would you have done differently, strategically in the real estate side? What opportunities should you look at in a market like now versus not?
A couple of things, Trevor, come to mind immediately for me. From a practical standpoint, I would have made sure that I had a lot more liquidity on my side, right? I would have been very liquid. But back then, I was just kind of flying by the seat of my pants, and I was managing expenses based on how much I had in the account. Yeah. And that's the complete opposite of how you should do it. And if you find yourself in that position now, a great book I would highly recommend is Profit First. Highly recommend that book. I know obviously Pumpkin Plan, you're a big fan, same author. But digging deeper in terms of X's and O's, you have to know your market. You have to understand inventory levels. You have to understand days on market, what's happening in your local market or wherever you're investing. And dude, back then I kind of chuckle now because I had no clue about the market and I was just kind of going with the flow, and back then people say if you could fog a mirror, you were making money in real estate. And we have to be very careful, Trevor, this dude, in this business, a lot smarter than you probably are. You can, in some cases, you can get paid and get paid very well to make mistakes, and it covers up a lot of flaws. Well, when the market turns, you're not able to benefit from that. So a couple practical things is just make sure you're liquid. Number 2, understand the marketplace, invest in relationships. We talked about investing in yourself. I think equally as important is investing in relationships with agents, private lenders. I would have had a lot more private lenders lined up back then. And I was fortunate that I was able to get past that period. It didn't sink me. I didn't have to file bankruptcy or anything like that. But I know very, very smart people that weren't so fortunate, people smarter than me. So don't get too cocky. When things are going good, make sure that you're stocking some capital away, and make sure that you're not getting in over your head, right? So if you're rehabbing out there, make sure that you're choosing the right projects. If you're wholesaling, I think wholesaling now, it's a great opportunity, but don't make the mistake I made where you put all your eggs in that basket and you're not taking some of that profit and putting it into cash flow producing assets.
Yep.
So those are some of the things that immediately come to mind for me.
Dude, that's good. So Adrian on our team, who's a part of your mastermind,
love him.
Dude, amazing guy. Him and I are doing deals together in Wilmington, North Carolina. He sent me a box today, kind of updating to the deals that we've got going. And one of the reasons, like, I'm very careful with who and what I invest in, right? And I've got some really, really good friends who I totally trust them. To do the deals and to do them right, and for me to put my money into their deals. But what I look for, especially right now in this phase of the market, is a deal that we can get in and out of as quickly as possible. And so that's one of the reasons that I'm attracted to doing the work with Adrian. We're turning these things fast, and we're turning some of them in less than 30 days, but all of them are less than 90 for sure. And our sweet spots, if we can acquire it and have it completely sold and then the cash is recouped in less than 60 days, that's kind of our aim. And so I feel comfortable with that right now. And we'll kind of keep on looking at things in the quarterly basis on, should we change that? Should we not? But everyone out here, take that cue from Alex. He did a big rehab of a higher risk type of property, a luxury property, a big property, at the height of the market, and the market just happened to turn out from underneath him. And those properties are the ones that get hard to sell the fastest, and the value tanks the most is your condos, anything that's luxury, anything that's specialty. Guys, be really careful on those types of properties now. And just use your common sense.
Trevor, a couple other things to really piggyback on this topic before we move on is this is a self-awareness game, and that's ironic because you have the self-awareness, artwork right behind you. Double down, triple down on your strengths. You have to find the balance, and there's no right or wrong, but you got to figure out what's right from a risk reward perspective. I had never rehabbed the property. Getting into a rehab, that's just not smart. Right. And the other thing is, when you go into projects, to Trevor's point, try to be in and out as quickly as possible. And this, even though the market's hot, there's still a lot of uncertainty. COVID is still out there. And we just, with the elections around the corner and everything else, depending on when you're listening to this, could really impact the market. So try to figure out a way to kill deals before you get into them. If you can kill the deal, it probably shouldn't be a deal you should get in. If you try to kill the deal and you fail, that's probably a deal you should do.
Dude, so let's dig into that a little bit. If you can explain that, what does it mean to kill a deal?
Yeah, basically in a nutshell, fancy word underwriting. If you're new to real estate, it just basically means running the numbers on the property and trying to figure out. So if we're talking specifically rehabs, you might have a fudge factor of you might try to make the deal work with a 5% fudge factor, but test that, right? Stress test it. What if you put a 10 to 15% fudge factor? In other words, if everything went south on the deal and you had to tap into this reserves, this fudge factor reserves or oh crap reserves, does the deal only work if you have 5%? What if you were to stress test it and go to 15%? Would the deal still work? So that's just a small example of what I mean by trying to kill the deal. Yep. If the deal works just by the skin of your teeth, it's not a deal you should get involved in my opinion.
Cool. That's good. I like it. Well, dude, one thing before I forget, I've mentioned you guys, you have a mastermind. I don't make any money from saying this, guys, but I can vouch for it. I've known Alex for forever. And Adrian is in it as a paid member who's on our team. What is the mastermind, dude? And just kind of tell people about your mastermind a little bit.
Yeah, the small 3-word answer is it's lifestyle and business optimization. And there's so many great masterminds out there. You'll never hear me say a bad word. I mean, the people that run these masterminds that you and I both know. And when Steve Kavanaugh and I got together to launch Ascent, we asked ourselves what's missing. And I've been a part of so many masterminds, and what was missing is I always had to get a coach outside of the mastermind. And vice versa. When I had a coach, I always had to join a mastermind. So we wanted to put it all under one roof where we get the benefit of the one-on-one coaching with the power and the leverage that a mastermind community brings. And I think the other thing that makes it very unique is that we focus on life first, and then we help our members modify and tweak their existing, in many cases, already successful businesses to help them achieve the desired lifestyle or vision that they want to live.
Cool.
I think entrepreneurs, dude, like we look at our calendar sometimes and it's filled with many times meetings and just it's all this stuff and it's business related. You and I think are cut from a different cloth, or we've chosen to approach things a little different where like I have family stuff first in my calendar. I have the things that give me energy. You know, you have a great energy audit, which I've gone through. And so I'm very aware of the things that put a smile on my face, like this, what we're doing. I love doing this is on my calendar, not something that I don't enjoy doing. And so we get really clear with our members about, hey, what do you want? Right. And oftentimes that's a simple question, but it's a difficult one for many people to answer. What do you want? What do you want your life to look like spiritually, health-wise, emotionally, relationships? And we drill down and help them essentially document a vision. And then based on what they've told us they want, we look at their existing business and say, okay, well, is it in alignment? And can we get your business? Like, is your business meant as a vehicle to help you live your vision? If that makes sense.
I want to dig into this topic now in a big way because I'm passionate about it first. I mean, I know you are, and you've gone through your own change recently, which we'll talk about.
Yeah.
And it comes out as a result of doing that type of thing of measuring, hey, what do I want? What am I going for? What's my passion, purpose? Like whatever version of that question you have. And does this current business in its current state help me get there? And then you can work it backwards and either structure that business so it does, or you change. And we've both done that. We've both changed businesses. We both exited businesses. I didn't do it very successfully, but I exited them. But so let me kind of dig into this really quick. Right before hopping on with you, I was fly fishing this morning up on the North Umpqua River with Pace Morby. So guys, go follow my Instagram, trevor.mauch, MAUCH. Follow me over there. Tons of pictures from the fly fishing trip today. It was a blast. But on that trip, Pace and I were talking on the drive back, and we were talking about this topic. You know, we're talking about the different businesses he has and the different businesses I have and have had. And how he is able to now travel around America in a Airstream for 3 months with his wife and his child because he's structured the business in a way that gets him what he wants. He's defined what that is. Now he builds a business for that. And same thing with me with Carrot. I just got off of a 1 month sabbatical, fancy name, but sabbatical. I didn't check into work one time. I deleted all communication apps, and they didn't check in with me. And the crazy thing is, during the sabbatical, I would have talks with people that are in the traditional employment mindset and world, which is great. That's just not where I want to be. That it was unfathomable for them to know that I took a month off and I didn't check into anything. And they were all like, "What do you do for work?" It's not about what we do for work. Like, I know a lot of software company owners that could never do that. Because of what Alex said, you got to define what you want and then build it for that. So let me toss it back your way. When you're working with someone, let's say there's a new mastermind person, you're going to coach them in those first sessions. What are some of those questions you might ask them in that first session to kind of drill down into discovering what they want if they're not clear on it? And what would you do after that?
I'll give you a couple, I'll rapid fire. I'll throw out some of the questions that we ask. And again, a lot of these are simple questions, and you might hear me throw out these questions and you kind of gloss over them because you've heard this before, but ask yourself a deeper question and say, well, what is that answer for me? So I ask, why do you do what you do? Like what's quite frankly, just what's your purpose? Like why does your current business exist? Is your current business designed to support you? Is it for us? Like, why do you do what you do? I ask, how do you define success? Right? Like what does success mean to you? And everybody's going to have a different answer, and there might be some commonalities, but what's success to you? You know, like just define that. Yep. What's interesting is that oftentimes these calls are on Zoom, and probably 50% of the time I get somewhat of a blank stare, or I get a little bit of stuttering and mumbling, and because it's a simple question, but again, it's sometimes people just don't know, or they're trying to kind of like piece it together on the fly. And so I help them get clarity on one of the last questions I'll ask is, what do you want your life to look like and be about? And forget money, forget material possessions. Just what do you want? What gives you happiness? What gives you joy and fulfillment? So let's start there. And then, and this isn't something that's done in a half hour or 1 hour coaching call. This is something that requires a lot of work, and it requires just a lot of inner work, and going through certain exercises and getting clear on your unique ability and your God-given talents and strengths. And so, from there, we probably spend the first, in many cases, several weeks just working on what they want for their life. And the final end product, which is not even an end product, it's a living, breathing document that changes as your life changes, is a 1-page vision. Cool. Right? And this 1-page vision is, we break it up into different categories, so think of a pizza, and you got 8 slices, and, so you have family, and you got health, and you got the spirituality, and you have fun, and you have hobbies, and you have all these different areas. And so I asked them, 1 to 10, how would you rate where you're at right now? How would you rate your relationships on a scale of 1 to 10? 10 being, it couldn't be any better. 1 is, it totally sucks.
Yep.
And then I ask you to rank from top to bottom, what's most important in your life, and I've heard this somewhere, but if I look at your bank account and your calendar, I can pretty much tell you what you value and where your priorities are.
Yep.
And what's interesting, Trevor, is that when I take people through this exercise, what they tell me they're struggling the most on, like what they rate 6 or below, oftentimes is what they're telling me is a top priority to them. And that's where we place the focus. We don't try to turn their life around in a couple of calls. That's just not reality. But we pick one area and we focus on that, And then once we lay the groundwork from a personal perspective, then we can start to transition at looking at their business and going into the X's and O's. And oftentimes, dude, it's like Tony Robbins talks about that 2mm shift that can change things for you. And other times it's just about as simple as making a decision and setting boundaries. Hey, these are my working hours. And outside of this, I'm fully present with my family or my friends or whatever it is that you're doing.
Dude, it's so cool because Carrot Camp, we were talking about that right before we hit record on this. And those who have come to Carrot Camp, they know that I think people expect me to be talking about lead generation, all that kind of stuff here, guys. I don't teach anything about lead generation at Carrot Camp. Now, other people do. The guests do who are crushing it at lead gen. It's all successful investors and agents. You're going to hear all you need from those guys implementing the stuff I've been teaching for years. But I don't teach anything about that stuff. I teach about the stuff that Alex is talking about of really getting our why more concrete and making sure that we have a real reason behind why this business even exists. Because Alex and his team and the people in the mastermind, or me and my team and the people at Carrot Camp, we can teach you guys all day long how to do the tactical thing of getting a lead or negotiating a deal or doing whatever it is. We can teach that all day long. But I know so many people, and I've been on the other end of this as well sometimes, where we've nailed the tactics of monetization of a business, but the more money, more leads, all that stuff, it actually amplifies the good and the bad in the other parts of your life. And right. So if you're already a 2 out of 10 on health and fitness, and you don't have mechanisms or intention in place to change that, and we teach you how to get more leads and deals, it's probably going to make it a 1 out of 10. It's 100%. Like, it's going to make it worse. So, and that's not what you want at the end of the day for any of it. And so guys, take Alex's advice, because this is crazy important. And if you're not someone who has the access to the right information or the right coaches, the right people, or you haven't done these things yet, I know for me, that's what I had to do. Like, I joined Greg Clement's mastermind in 2012, the only year he ever did it. And it was for that reason. It's like, it seems like Greg has more of these things nailed in his life than I do. It seems like he spends a lot of time with his family. It seems like he's having a lot more fun in business than I am. Mm-hmm. He's doing interesting things. It seems like he's very successful in it. It seems like he's not working a lot in what he does do.
I want more of that.
Yeah, it's like, and I didn't know what all that was. I just saw this like aura of all this stuff, not stuff like as in things, but ways he was living life. And I'm like, I just want more of that. And so I ponied up the $20K to join that mastermind, which was not easy for me at that time in 2012. And it changed me, because the one major thing I got out of that was being close to someone who was, Greg wasn't perfect. I'm not perfect. You're not perfect, but he was better than I was at it. And I could learn from him, and he taught me how to find my unique ability. I found that one thing, and that lit everything else up. So guys, whether Ascend is the right thing for you, and this podcast is not to sell Ascend, but I believe in it. And if it's something that is going to help you guys change your business and your life, you should seek it out. Or if it's going through some of my podcasts to talk a lot about this stuff, either way, seek it out. Don't just seek out getting more leads and more money.
Yep. Trevor, one other thing I'll mention is I really want people to be intentional about, living the best version of themselves as possible, because too many people that I think you and I talk to, they're just kind of going with the waves and the flow of life, and I think unless you're very purposeful, intentional about what you want, as cliche as this may sound, and I'm not a big fan of cliches, the next minute isn't promised for us, and for me personally, regret is one of those things that I refuse to have in my life. I don't ever want to look back and say woulda, coulda, shoulda, or I wish, I don't use that language. And the thought that's probably the biggest fear, if that's even the right word to use, is getting to some point in the future and looking back and saying, damn, I wish I would have done that. Or I wish why did I let fear hold me back in this area of my life? Or why didn't I play all out? Dude, I'll share something with your audience that they probably don't even know, but you and I had a conversation. I don't recall the year. I want to say it was maybe 2015, 16, maybe even 17. And I remember, I hate to even bring this up, but you shared with me a story of somebody you knew, a friend that passed away.
Yep. And
how it impacted you and how you started to play all out in the different areas of your life, for something as simple as washing the dishes or cleaning your drawers up. And to this day, it's something that has stuck with me. And every now and then I don't play all out, and I'm not living up to my potential, and I'm not raising the standard. And I think of those conversations, and it's a reminder. It goes back to the self-awareness thing.
Yep.
And so to your point, I'm far from perfect, and I make mistakes on a daily basis, but the more conscious you are of these things, and the more conversations you can have with people like Trevor, et cetera, plugging into the podcast, et cetera, your life can change, man. It just sounds very cliche, but you can have a very different life if you're intentional and purposeful about it.
Dude, I love it. So I want to get to this topic here in a second, but I'm going to plant a little seed for people, and we'll come back to it. Alex has gone through a major change in his career and life as well by result that we'll talk about, and we'll talk about why he did and how he did and how it relates to you if you're an investor or an agent, wholesaler or an agent, and what your long-term strategy is as a wholesaler or agent. But I want to go back to the topic we were just talking about. So Pace Morby's here. We had pizza across the street. One of my friends here locally, who is the son of a good friend of mine, who's a real estate agent, Ricky Graham, Isaac Graham, actually now works for Pace's company for his mentoring company. And they had a chance to meet together yesterday, which was really cool. So I'm driving Isaac back home, and they have a property out next to ours on the river, and they're staying out there all of August, camping and stuff like that with family and grandparents. And Isaac and I were talking, and I think it's really easy when you guys are listening to this podcast episode, or you see somebody on a YouTube video or up front at a mastermind or whatever it is. It's really easy for us to look at those people and kind of idolize them and think that person's got it all figured out. For me, 2012, Greg was kind of that guy. And when you get inside the fold, you realize they're amazing at these things, but they might be a 2 or 3 out of 10 in these other things right now. And then they work on those and they get them up, but then something else kind of sags. And Isaac was kind of really hard on himself mentally. And I think it's really easy for us to do that, to go, man, why can't I figure this thing out? Mm-hmm. And for me, life goes in ebbs and flows. Guys, I hope this is encouraging for everybody listening to this, but because I'm decently successful, I've figured out ways to make a business that seems to be working. I've hit many of the goals I've set, and there's still some big ones I'm continually challenging myself on and removing limiting beliefs. But things go like this, they do pretty darn good. And you think, man, I got it figured out. And there's been many times in my life, and Isaac said this too. He's like, I was in Ikigai. I was in flow. Everything was just working great several months ago. And he's like, I thought I could kind of bottle that feeling. I thought I could bottle everything that I was doing. I got it figured out finally. It's always going to be like this from now on. And he said then, however much time passed, he's like, man, I don't know what it was. But then before I knew it, I found myself in this funk. And I'm like, I couldn't figure out how to get back in that old feeling again. And I said, man, we all go through that. I think that the aim is this, though, is over time figuring out how to identify and kind of like diagnose or what's your indicator that when I feel this way for too long, or when I feel this way, it indicates me starting to slide into a funk or starting to slide into whatever it is. It's not your ideal optimal state.
Yeah.
And so that's the first thing, is you have to start to write those things down or mentally take notes of, you know what, for me, it's when I stop waking up early and energized to do so. For me, it's when it might be 4 or 5 o'clock and I don't have as much energy at 4 or 5 o'clock as I did at 10 o'clock in the morning. For me, it's when I stop filling out my routine and goal tracker. And I stop doing that for too many days in a row. I pull back and I'm like, damn, I've been in this for 2 weeks. So that's the first thing, is you got to have an indicator, kind of like stock market people. They set these little software things where as soon as this one thing happens on this stock, it's an indicator that triggers them that says, hey, this thing happened. This thing is at this point. Once you have the indicators identified in your life, hey, I feel this way for X amount of time, I'm starting to slide into a suboptimal state, then you need to have a prescription or a diagnosis, which is your 1 to 10 thing. Okay, cool. I feel like I'm in a suboptimal state. Now let me take those 8 categories that you've got, and now let me rate them 1 to 10 to see where it's messing up. So you got to have an indicator. You have to have a diagnosis. And then the last part is a subscription. Okay, indicator, diagnosis, subscription.
Love that.
And so as soon as you diagnose which spots you're not doing great on in those 8 categories that Alex has, I have 6. Mine are my 6 Fs, but they're very similar to yours. Faith, family, fitness, friends, fun, and finances. So they're pretty much the same, just different names.
Yep.
Once you identify the 1 or 2 spots you really need to get better, now you move it over and go, now here's what I do to get back to my optimal state. And we can talk about that here in a little bit, what you do and what I do. But I just wanted to tell that to people because it's really easy, once again, to look at us and go, oh, well, they've got it figured out. I'm just going to be hard on myself. Guys, it's not about not having those dips. It's about evening out the dips so they don't go as deep for as long. And that's it.
You nailed it. And you talk about, so I use the word seasons, right? We all go through seasons in our life. And so if we were to graph this out, you say even out the dips. I think the equivalent of what I would say is you want to make sure that throughout these like waves that look like mountains, you want the line to be going up this way.
Yep.
Right. You know what I mean? It doesn't mean you're not going to have dips, because that's not reality. Like, look, we're human beings and we're flawed, and we're certainly not perfect despite what you may think. Sometimes the people that you appear to be most put together are the ones that are deepestly flawed. Right. So, don't compare yourself to others, right? You should only compare yourself to your potential and yourself. And that's a mistake I've made. And I think with social media, it's so easy to see the wins and the flash and everything else that people put out there. And yet it hurts me when I see people making critical life and business decisions based on the perception of somebody else, right? Versus, and I think people that do that, it's going back to our previous conversation, is because they're not clear about what they want. Like, why are they here? So, but no, man, I think you nailed it. I love that 3-step formula.
Dude, so let's transition. So what you want, that's a good segue. You've recently changed some big stuff. Why don't you tell people the big change you've recently had with your wholesaling business, and we'll kind of talk about why, and we'll help other people figure out what they want their wholesaling or real estate agent business to do for them long term.
Yeah. So right when the summer came around here, I finally made a decision that I had been, I'll use the word wrestling with for about a good year, Trevor. And this is despite all the inner work and all the work I've done on myself. I recently exited my wholesaling operation. I didn't sell it. I would love to say, hey, I sold this business and I made out, and that wasn't the case. Having said that, I came to an arrangement with my right hand, one of my key team members, where I'm fortunate that he retained me as a consultant. I'm still going to get a piece of deals moving forward. But let me backtrack. I use the word wrestle, Trevor, because I've been doing this 15 years and I host a podcast as well. And I'm fortunate that, I've had some people that have come to me and I've been able to help some people. And there's a certain part of me that almost like it became my identity, but I'm so much more than a real estate investor, an entrepreneur. That's like, your business is not you and you are not your business. It's a separate living, breathing organism, right? But along the way, it almost became my identity, or at least I started to tell myself that this is who I was when I'm so in that, right? And, I joined the mastermind, a well-known mastermind, 2017. And when I joined that, I got inspired to want to grow and scale my operation. And along the way, it became about bigger, not necessarily better. Yep. It became about how many deals I was closing, how much money we were making, how big my team was. And I kind of got lost in my own way. And, I remember at this time a year ago, I looked up and my overhead had ballooned to somewhere between 40 and 50 grand a month, give or take. And for some people listening, that's nothing. And for others, that's crazy, right? Yep. For me, I never got into this business to have a high overhead, low margin business. And that's what it had become, dude. Yep. And to me, that wasn't success in business. And so in July and August, I started to slowly unwind this monster that I had built, which was meant to serve people at a higher level and to provide for me. And it was doing anything but. Right. And so we talk about that. I viewed this as a failure. I had this team. I was responsible. I had more stress than I was accustomed to. And it wasn't the positive kind of stress. Yeah. Although I look back now and I've grown so much from it, I had to go through that fire in order to get to who I am now. But I lost my vision. My vision wasn't to have a big team and all this overhead where I had to close a couple deals a month just to break even. Yep. And it became a volume game, and that's not what it was about for me. So yeah, man, I started to work with my coach and I started to ask myself those questions that were uncomfortable to answer. And I think it was April, May when I finally just wrapped my head around the fact that, hey, I need to chart out a plan to exit this sooner rather than later, because it wasn't, Trevor, doing deals got boring. Yep. And I don't say that in a cocky, arrogant way. I hope it doesn't come across that way. It just literally became boring. Like, I was very grateful and fortunate the money that came from those closings, but there was no connection. There was no emotional attachment to that. I knew we were helping homeowners, but I you know what it was, man? I felt like God had been tapping me on the shoulder. This is my feeling. I felt like God had been tapping me on the shoulder for a while, saying, there's something bigger and greater for you to do with your life than just continue to run a wholesaling operation. And similar to when I was working at GE and I asked, hey, do I want that person's job? It was a definitive no. I asked myself, what if I was still in this position running a wholesaling operation a year from now? Yep. And my answer was, I'd be very disappointed. I wouldn't be happy. And so, yeah, brother, I had some conversations with key team members, and they supported me. They were great conversations. Now they're thriving. I get to focus on what fills my cup, and what I'm happy about. It got to a point, Trevor, where people would reach out to me about the podcast having an impact on their business or life, and I have joy and fulfillment from that than from a real estate closing. Yep. That's the God's honest truth. And so I said, I need to be doing more of that. I need to focus on Ascent. I need to focus on the podcast. I need to focus on other things I had interest in. And yeah, man, now I think I mentioned to this before we started recording, it feels like a weight's been lifted off my shoulders. Yep. And yeah, man, I'm just genuinely happy. Not that I wasn't happy before, but I wasn't in my lane. Mm-hmm.
Dude, I'm first of all, I'm so happy for you, dude. Like that's one of my personal missions, is to help entrepreneurs have businesses and build businesses that give them freedom and give them impact. Okay. I've got this thing called the Entrepreneur's Freedom Formula. I did a workshop on it in February, but I've been continuing to refine this framework, and actually walked two of my friends through it yesterday. And they're like, dude, that right there is exactly what I need, because my business is starting to run away with me. And so this is something I'm honing more and more and more and more. And what you're doing there is you're taking you're making the decision to be intentional about what your business is, and you're not letting outside influences come in and tell you what they think your business should be.
Right.
And like you said, it's really easy when you go to a mastermind or Carrot Camp or whatever it is, and this person's doing 5 deals a month, and this is doing 25 deals a month. Pace that I'm here with, I don't know how many deals he's doing a month specifically, but on the podcast that we rolled out a couple of days ago, he's doing 15 to 20 a month. That's a lot of deals, dude.
Yep.
And so it's easy to have that outside world tell you what your business should look like. And I've done it. And dude, it's so cool that you have stepped away from the business. And here's the thing, man. I did the same thing in 2011 and 12 with my former business partner, Patrick. We're still great friends. We have a mastermind that we run together. And the funny thing was, when I stepped away from that business and left it, it grew. Like, it didn't get smaller because I was gone. It grew because I was doing work that was draining my energy. Therefore, I wasn't doing my best work. Therefore, Patrick didn't have a chance to step up. And he actually was way better at all the work I was doing. And so there's going to be someone in that organization, dude, that is just going to step into that if maybe they already have. And who knows, that business may become the best version it's ever been, because someone who is earlier in their journey as far as that type of business model goes, they have that fire to tackle that right now. Right. And now you're moving to the next phase, which is really cool.
And, you know, somebody told me something months ago that kind of, it just hit me between the eyes. And this was my coach that I was working through, that he knew for the last year how I had kind of been feeling. And he said, you're robbing people in the future of the talents that you have and what you can produce. And so I think about you, Trevor, 2011, when you and Patrick kind of decided, hey, you need to focus on this, I need to focus on something else. Had you not made that decision, Carrot probably wouldn't have been born. And here you are, thousands and thousands and thousands of customers later that you've helped, you know, you got raving fans. You would have robbed those people from Carrot and from your team members and just the impact and the charities you guys have supported. So that resonated with me when he told me, he was like, you're robbing people of what you're truly meant to do. And I'm not going to sit here and say, hey, you know, I have everything all figured out. That's not the case, but I feel like I'm on the path and I'm happy. And that's success to me.
Well, dude, like you said before, you're entering a new season, which is really, really exciting. And so one thing that I want to have everyone who's a real estate agent, who's a real estate investor of any type, wholesaler, flipper, I don't care what it is. Alex ran the business for 15 years. Okay. He was in it for 2, 3, 4 years. And then now I'm going to shift and switch. I see that happen way too much, where someone is a wholesaler, a flipper, or real estate agent. They hit it hard for a couple of years, 2, 3 years, maybe 4, maybe even less. And then they shift and they create this pattern in their life to where they're the 2 to 3 year person, 2, 3 years, then shift. And the reason that they do that, and I'm saying this from personal experience because I did that. That was everything before Carrot. I always had something come up 2 to 3 years. Every 2 to 3 years, I had to look for new opportunity. And it was because I was always trying to run away from something, and I never found what to run towards. And in that first 12 to 24 months, for me, is always pretty darn interesting. You're building something. But then after the 24 months to maybe 4 years, it's kind of more in maintenance mode unless you have a vision to run towards that excites you a lot. And so now, dude, you're running towards something in your new business, and you had a chance to leave the other business in other people's hands, which is exciting.
Yep. It's an I get to versus an I have to.
Yep.
And you make that decision. You get to do the things that you choose to do. You don't have to. So, yeah.
So let me wrap this thought here for everyone who is a wholesaler or agent listening to this or flipper. And they might be going, well, shoot, should I keep being a wholesaler? Should I keep being a real estate agent? What advice would you give someone who is in the business that you just left? But once again, guys, the context is you've been doing it for 15 years. Okay. But what advice would you give someone about that business model as a wholesaler or a real estate agent right now? And how can they continue to succeed? And how can they use that business as a jumping off point to possibly what's next down the road?
I want to answer the question directly, but I want to preface it by saying that my answer could vary depending on what your specific goals are and what your vision is. I don't want to beat a dead horse there, but generally speaking, you know, I've had the privilege and benefit to work with a lot of wholesalers throughout the country and, you know, throughout several years. Wholesaling is usually just a stepping stone. It's a vehicle. It's a platform to generate a bunch of cash. But what are you going to do with that cash? Is the goal to just operate a wholesaling business, which is transactional in nature, and quite honestly is debatable if it's even a sellable business. I don't know too many people, if any, that have sold a wholesaling business. I don't think you're going to see it, sold on the S&P 500 or anything like.
No,
I have my doubts if that's even possible, and I would love for somebody to prove me wrong. So think bigger picture, right? And so if wholesaling is a great vehicle right now, and if you're in it, be all in and do everything you can to help as many people and to make as much money as possible, but make sure that you're being very smart about the profits, that it's a cash generation business.
Cool.
It's meant to generate a bunch of cash, but then what are you doing with that cash? Don't make the mistake I made where I was 10, 12 years into this business. I had made a bunch of money, but I looked back and I said, well, where's the cash flow?
Yep.
Right. If I got hit by a bus, is my family taken care of, or does my wife have to try to figure out wholesaling? And that was a big aha for me. Right. So, my advice to people would be, if you're wholesaling, be the very best wholesaler you can possibly be, but understand that it's probably just a vehicle for you. And you may not know what the next thing is. That's perfectly fine. But start to do that work to figure out, hey, what's your greater purpose? Where can you add the most value and impact to people? And if you're not making the kind of money you want to be making, chances are you're just not solving a bigger problem, right? Yep. So I think that's the advice I'd have for people that are listening to this, that are wholesalers or agents. Be the very best that you can be at that, but understand that it's probably just a stepping stone for you.
Dude, that's so good. And one analogy that I like to use with it too, I use it from marketing. We talk about evergreen marketing, right? With hamster wheel, you get on the hamster wheel, it immediately gives feedback. That's your direct mail, cold call. That all works. But eventually you're going to get kind of burnt out and you got to get off the hamster wheel. When you get off the hamster wheel, what happens? It slowly comes to a stop and you got to get back on. But over here, evergreen marketing is like stacking bricks. There's a big old pile of bricks over there. They're not a wall yet. There's the material sitting there, and it's hard work to stack those bricks. It's not as easy as hopping on this hamster wheel.
Yeah.
And it's really tempting for us to do this and hop on the hamster wheel instead of picking up those bricks and stacking bricks that are going to be there. And eventually you step away and there's a brick wall that's doing your work. Now let's translate this to business. Okay. So outside of marketing, the same thing, wholesaling and being a real estate agent and selling toilets and like, most businesses are hamster wheel businesses where you have to turn transactions all the time. And then as soon as you stop the marketing, or as soon as you, whatever it is, you get burnt out on that continual hamster wheel run, then you step off and those deals start to slow down. And so you can't get the true freedom from that. You can't really make the greatest impact you want to make when you're on that. And so what I would suggest everyone listening to this do, if you're an investor or an agent, like Alex had said, take some of those profits and then stack bricks, put them into some sort of income stream that's an evergreen income stream. A lot of real estate investors or agents, they tend to take some of those profits and buy rental properties. They might take some of the profits and invest in other companies or create other companies with people. You can take those profits and do whatever you want to do, but make sure that you are taking profits from this active income stream over here of investing or an agent, and then put some of it into something that can eventually remove you from the hamster wheel so you don't have to do that. And so 100%. With the next business, dude, do that. You're already doing it with Ascent. That's something where it does have the recurring in there, and it's something you're really, really passionate about. So I'm excited about you. I'm excited about you, but also excited about your future. Dude.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you. Well, I think I may have shared this with you back in June, but you've inspired me along the way in many ways. So, and I consider you to be a big part of that. From time to time, I think about that conversation we had years ago. And so I want to thank you for that.
Dude, I appreciate you. Appreciate you big time, man. And vice versa. It inspires me to seeing people do cool stuff as an entrepreneur. So Alex, why don't you tell people where they can find it? How do they find out about Ascend? Where can they listen to the podcast, the whole thing?
Thank you, my friend. Thank you. So Ascend is ascendyoursuccess.com. Would love to connect with you if you have any interest in that or just want to find what it is. And the Flip Empire Show is a podcast I've been hosting since 2016. And it's just such a blessing in my life because I have the opportunity to connect with people like Trevor, and I get to help you. So if you have a real estate operation, or you want to, believe it or not, even though it's called the Flip Empire Show, we talk about so much more than just X's and O's of real estate. A lot of what we talk about there is what we talk about on the show. So you can find it on the typical, podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts, etc., or just head over to flipempire.com.
Dude, I love it. Guys, go to flipempire.com. Go find the Ascend mastermind page. Use the URL. We'll link it up in the show notes down below. And guys, plug into a coach, plug into a community of people who can help you see these extra insights, and take the advice that Alex had a chance to do. Take that little test, the 8 categories or the 6 Fs. They're the same thing. Guys, do that test today. Find where you're not doing as good as you want to do, and then create a prescription to go solve that. Alex, appreciate that, Caddy, man. Excited about your future, man. And let's continue to stay connected. Thank you.
Thank you, my friend.